These are the unknown things which unfolding man must know before he can begin to manifest his own divine inheritance as an omnipotent and omnipotent being. Number 1. The invisible universe is in absolute control of the visible. The invisible universe dominates and controls all motion by magnetic division into cube wave fields of zero curvature, beyond which no moving thing can pass. It can, however, repeat itself in neighboring wave fields, but always in reverse, as mirrors reverse. The geometry of the zero universe is based upon the cube and cube sections. Their planes are in zero curvature, and they reflect their forms in matter in crystal structures, which are the only forms of zero curvature in nature. All motion in all the electric universe is curved. The curved universe is matured form. The curved universe of matured form is based upon the sphere. The sphere is a compressed cube. The sphere is a series of true circles, no matter where it may be divided into sections, by cutting through it in one plane anywhere. Number 3. All motion is equally compressed in respect to gravity. Therefore, all motion is in true gravity-centered circles, which multiply into spheres and again divide into true circles. The source of energy, which creates true circles, is at their very center. The source of all energy is the Creator. All motion of every nature, whether of thought or action, spins in true circular control around the omnipotent Creator of that motion, and in planes of 90 degrees from a shaft of any extension of motion. Number 5. No man nor creating thing can in the least way become off-center from God, or can his orbit around God be aught at any time than a true circle, even though its seeming orbit is an ellipse. We think of orbits of planets as being elliptical, and so they seem. But such illusions in nature are multitudinous and must be overcome by comprehension. Man's body is compressed motion, which encircles man's invisible mind source in true circles. He can never depart from these true circles. His thinking and his forming body cells encircle them without knowing that he is but manifesting his immortal self, or without knowing that the immortal self which centers him is continually whispering to whatever of mind awareness has yet unfolded within him. The noise and turmoil of outer sensing drowned out those inner whisperings for long eons. But there comes a day in his unfolding when he begins to hear that inner voice. More long ages pass before he knows that the cosmos of all that is speaking to him, and that he is that cosmos. Number 7. Gravity controls the moving universe, but man has never known or even suspected that his own immortality and gravity are one in their centering of his sensed body. Nor has he ever known that gravity extends to a shaft as his body extends from thought ring planes to mass, and as equators divide to become pairs and unite to lose their division. These things man must know together with the omnipresence of gravity, which but seems to the senses to extend into shafts made up of many points, which are all one. When man overcomes this illusion of the senses, he likewise outgrows the possibility of forming sensed conclusions, such as the nuclear atom, which violates all principle of this electric universe, which nature is. Number 8. Man plainly senses the motion of a plane or boat or a speeding bullet and thinks of it as a direction of motion. He sees the motion of a wave or the vibration registered by a harp string or the cardiogram of a heart pulsation. His senses also interpret these as motion and directions of motion, not knowing that they are but registering the curvature of gravity control, and that the direction of motion is 90 degrees removed from that direction of gravity control. Number 9. That which cannot be sensed in invisible space is yet to be dynamically known. The mystery of the crystal and its cleavages, which divides crystals into units, lies within the knowledge of space geometry, which can be scientifically organized into mind visibility, as bodies in motion can be scientifically organized into sense visibility. There is nothing in nature which the senses can feel that the mind cannot know. Number 10. The great mystery of all of the mysteries of matter lies hidden within the inert gases of the wave. The nature and structure of these keys to motion has never been known. It is time that they must be known. All of these mysteries shall be briefly touched upon herein, for the express purpose of giving enough knowledge of the true nature of the atom to prevent it being used to endanger the human race. Not one action of motion by man or nature in all the universe can escape from the absolute centering of its action by the controller of all action. Anything or any man who tries to escape from it or use his free will power to do as he chooses may exercise that privilege even unto destroying himself by so doing. He will not escape, however, from the perpetual control of his universal energy source. No matter what he does to upset the universal balance, he will find that the Creator of creation always centers him, and his own unbalanced orbit is still on center with his unbalance, and is perpetually in a plane of 90 degrees from the shaft upon which its circlings turn. Consider a top, for example, which is spinning true upon the planet's axis of gravity. All motion around that axis is in true circles and in planes of 90 degrees from that axis. The time comes when the top can no longer spin fast enough to keep its spinnings centered by the Earth's axis. As it slows its speed, its axis inclines. Every turn of the top still spins true to the now wobbling axis. That wobbling axis is compelled to revolve around its source of balance, however, and in doing so, it inscribes true circles around its gravity source, and they likewise are in planes of 90 degrees from that axis, as illustrated in the diagram A1 and A2. Consider the Earth's orbit for another example. When the Earth was where Mercury now is, there was but one common center of gravity and one equatorial plane for the Earth and for the Sun. The Earth has now left that position of perfect balance between itself and its source, and set up an equator of its own, which is at an angle of 23 degrees from the Sun's equator. Its axis has a similar variation to that of its source. It has not escaped God control, however, for the Sun's gravity still controls it by centering a larger circle which includes its entire wanderings around two centers instead of one. Figure 46C illustrates this principle in an off-center flywheel, which will turn with uneasy and uncomfortable oscillations if slow enough, but would shake itself to pieces if turned very fast. This example is a good symbol of our present civilization, which is ever turning faster in its eccentric orbit and ever approaching its dissolution. And now here are those pictures. Every thought and action in this universe is centered by its energy source, which controls its actions and thoughts from within and balances them from without by two extensions of that center. These extended poles are the ends of gravity shafts around which all masses rotate under true circular control. Figure 46D exemplifies the normal balance of equal interchange in sequential transactions. Every giving is balanced by an equal regiving. As long as that interchange continues, its product is good and will continue. If one of the two children upsets that balance by unequalizing the giving and regiving, to manifest nature's love principle, self-made disaster is certain to follow. The disasters of man's civilization are all self-made. Their orbits are one with their source. Man must someday learn that every cell of his body must be in tune with the universal rhythm in order to keep his body in balance, and every thought and action which controls his body should be within as close a circular orbit as possible to reach within to the divine source of all things, where omnipotence and omnipotence awaits all men. In this way only, and through such knowledge only, can man know the meaning of that silent voice which has tried to reach through his senses for ages. A continued effort to thus decentrate from concentrated movement to universal stillness gradually unfolds one's spiritual and intellectual nature. Decentration invites meditation, and meditation opens wide the doors for inspiration. The geniuses of the world are those who have learned to talk with God by transcending their senses and becoming mind beings. In this still very early stage of the unfolding of man ideal, he is very conspicuously body conscious, but faintly mind conscious. God's intent for man is that he should manifest mind, not body. The signs of the times tell us that more and more mind-conscious humans are coming into their fruition stage, but mass man is still body and sensation conscious. That is why chaos is spreading over the face of the earth. Culture is dying because sensation shuns culture. A Wagner or Mozart is worth billions and should be nourished. The Wagners and Mozarts of today can be found trying to survive by playing in nightclubs or selling vacuum cleaners. We have no pennies to spare for the arts of peace, while so many billions of dollars must be spent upon the arts of war and extolling those who kill. Man has chosen to upset his own balance by seemingly violating the inviolate. In the battle of civilization for body supremacy over mind, it may well be that the moral, mental, and spiritual decline of the last 50 years will continue into another degrading dark age. Time is naught, however, in nature, and man will again arise through the efforts of the few among the many who are now becoming more and more mind-conscious. Scientifically, what is happening to mankind at the present time is that he has chosen to distort his balanced circular orbit around his Creator. His free will, supported by his ignorance of his unavoidable close relationship to God, and his unawareness of his dependence on God, has influenced him to choose transient body sensations, body comforts, and body values instead of eternal mind values. It is not possible for man to continue to distort true circular orbits of man around God by choosing eccentric orbits or by unbalanced interchange in his human relations. No man or nation is powerful enough for that. Fear is the product of such unbalance. Neither man nor nation can survive fear. The universe is founded upon love, and man must someday become aware of the meaning of love as related to human survival. Our present civilization is hurting itself by building its own agonies and ills. It has become physically scientific instead of spiritually scientific. It has no living philosophy to overcome the philosophy of death, which is now threatening the world. Excuse me. War has taken 40 million lives in 40 years, but radioactivity can very easily take 400 million lives in 4 hours. 20 years ago, there was less than 3 pounds of uranium above this earth. Yet people are dying today from slow accumulation of that little over the years. Today we are creating 8,000 tons of uranium salts every year, which is ever so much more deadly. Not only that, we have 600,000 tons of uranium ore above ground. Who today can tell what the price will be that we must pay for that in human lives and deformed births? Who today can tell the price we shall be forced to pay in future years, when the upper atmosphere sends us its bill, and the concrete containers which have been thrown into the sea become radioactive Frankensteins? We cannot know for 20 or more years what that price will be, but if the intervening 20 years multiplies the amount of killer metals which will be above ground in the ratio of its present increase, it is quite possible that the doom of the human race is then inevitable. All of the above has been written to show that man cannot transcend nature or violate its tonal rhythms by attempting to travel outside of the orbit ordained for him. By so doing, he has extended his orbit in the direction of death by expanding his circle to take him further away from God. Figure 46 will clarify that for you. Note the orbit of the Earth. Its potential was maximum when its orbit was a true circle around its source. An elliptical orbit and a straying from its plane of balance with the Sun not only widens its circle of control, but unbalances its relations with its source by dividing its power by perihelion and aphelion positions in its orbit. The orbits of all the planets plainly mark out the road of death, which all dying things must follow. Can it be that man prefers to choose such a path, or is it because he just does not know? How long must it be before mankind will know his universe and his Creator sufficiently well to live in love instead of in fear? The answer to that is dependent upon the length of time it will still take for man to know his universe and to know God who centers it and him. As long as man chooses to think or act out of balance and close control with the magnetic light which centers his every cell as well as his soul identity, he but weakens himself by distancing himself from his source of power In so doing, however, he does not escape from its absolute control and watchful care over him, no matter what he does to hurt himself. All of the examples given in Figure 46 illustrate the principle of balanced control of all creating things by their Creator. It also illustrates the principle of multiplied power, which man gives to himself by ever drawing the circles of his body in closer circles of balanced relationship with his Maker, in order to become a mind being primarily and a body secondarily. The secret of power, therefore, for any man does not lie in his ability to create motion. It lies in his ability to knowingly control it. A little knowledge is more powerful than a big cyclotron. The oneness of gravity and magnetism. We have now arrived at a point where the relationship of gravity and magnetism can be more easily comprehended. They both belong to the zero universe as shown in Figure 6. They are both one, but each have a different connotation in common usage, which require two words to define their separate meanings. Just as an armchair and a rocking chair are both of them chairs, but requires two words to differentiate them. Gravity really means a point or shaft that can be located in the invisible universe where mind desires to concentrate thought and thought power. You cannot see gravity, but you can locate it at the very center of every creating thought ring, which constitutes what we call bodies of matter. You cannot see mind either, but you can locate mind also, for mind is also that center which balances, controls, surveys, and motivates its electric thought rings in their effort to simulate the ideal existent within that stillness by fast or slow motion. There is not more gravity or less gravity anywhere. The seeming increase of the power of gravity is electrical potential, which means faster motion in smaller circles. Gravity shafts and centers of gravity are the omnipotent zero in the mind universe. It is the same everywhere. It is all-powerful everywhere. The nearer that motion can come to it, the greater the power which can be drawn from it. In man that power is desire. Desire for closeness to God gives one that power in the measure of man's desire. The measure of power which man takes from it is the measure which is dependent upon his own desire for omnipotence and his willingness to multiply his thought power and action into electrical potential by action. In so doing, he decentrates to the source of where gravity multiplication begins in order to conceive his ideal and gain knowledge. He then concentrates to manifest God's omnipotence in him. Gravity and magnetic light are one, but the connotation of gravity differentiates it from the word mind. We'll start over. Gravity and what's wrong with me? Gravity and magnetic light are one, but the connotation of gravity differentiates it from the word mind or light, just as the word soul differentiates it from the word God. They are the same, however, for God is the universal soul, while soul in man means identity or being as a unit of the universal being. The moment that electricity divides the one changeless condition into pairs, it is necessary to balance and control those pairs. Gravity is the magnetic control and balancer, although its power never multiplies or divides. When gravity is stillness, where gravity is, stillness is. An area of stillness always surrounds gravity shafts. These areas are the holes which center the rings of electric potential, which continually multiply compression or divide it by expanding in accord with the desires of nature or man to manifest that all power which is within and omnipresent in all things. The one most important thing to burn into your consciousness is to realize that wherever motion is, it is centered by stillness, and that stillness is its cause. The universe is composed of electric thought rings of motion. Each thought ring is centered and controlled by the creator of that thought ring. God creates His universe that way. You create your universe that way. It is God who sits there. It is the magnetic light of all-knowing, all-powerful mind, which sits there. We call that centering point gravity. The reason why we call it gravity is because there are adjacent thought rings which have united together so closely that we think of them as mass instead of rings. Each added ring of the mass has its mind center in its own plane. In a mass, therefore, there are seemingly so many mind centers of stillness that they constitute a shaft. The word gravity arises from this fact. Gravity is a shaft of mind-controlled stillness. In that sense, gravity and God are one. Now you have the whole story except for one thought to complete it. Every point of that gravity point is the same point, for God's zero universe is omnipresent. It may take you many years to fully grasp the above, but you can never comprehend it by reasoning with your brain as a sense basis, for in that process is the motion of thinking. You must learn to be still and know. The inner thinking of deep meditation will take you into the zero world of reality, where illusion does not exist. The more you are able to find that center where the light of creation dwells, the more you will be able to discover the light of yourself. And that is the greatest miracle that can happen to anyone. When you find yourself, you also find God in His kingdom within you. When you have thus acquired full awareness of your own omnipotence, omnipotence, and omnipresence, you can then knowingly and authoritatively say, I and my Father are one. Man's unfolding power increases in the measure in which God awareness in him increases. The space which we cannot give here to explain our meaning is fully compensated, however, by the explanation in God will work with you but not for you. And I'll interject that I read part of that book, but not the entire book, on my site. The more you study that book, the more you will feel your closeness with God and dependence upon Him. As your power increases through that greater comprehension, your command over motion and over your own destiny increases in proportion. The main thing for you to fix into your consciousness is the fact that this is a mind and motion universe, and that mind centers motion. In the mind is all knowing and all power. In the motion is the image form of mind knowing, which manifests mind power without being that power. In that sense, it would be more exactly definitive to term it a mind and mind thought universe, for all electric motion is but the record in motion of mind thinking. It would be even more simple to think of our universe as a cosmic cinema, for it parallels the cinema of man in every respect.